So today we acknowledge the key work of Anxiety New Zealand, a trust that focuses primarily on anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorders and phobias. However, it also treats other associated conditions related to anxiety. In the studio is Chief Executive Sarah Woolard, who is passionate about removing barriers to mental health support, and psychologist Nadine Islam.
So a little bit about me. My name is Sarah, and I started as a volunteer in 2010. I worked on our 24-hour helpline for about 2 years and then moved to managing the practice. So my role now is CEO, and we've got an incredible team of pretty passionate people, and I really love working there.
Yeah, well, you built the team up to a large group of psychologists and supporters.
Yeah, it's a pretty good bunch of people. We've got 10 psychologists on board and about 100 volunteers at the moment. So we're a non-profit charity, and we specialise in providing support, treatment and education for anxiety and depression. And the Trust provides a range of services for kids right through to older adults. People don't need a diagnosis to use a service. Some people may or may not be looking for one. Mm-hmm. And we also help the wider community by educating health professionals and also other organisations. So in total, we support around 25,000 people per year, and we do that on a pretty small budget, but with a team of skilled people.
Right, and Nadine, how long have you been associated with Anxiety New Zealand?
Coming up 2 years now.
Right, so it had its change of name. It was well known as the Phobic Trust.
That's right.
Now it's changed its name to, I think, a name that is more contemporary with the issues that New Zealand society is facing.
Yes, well, look, we've got a long history. We originally started in 1983 and were officially incorporated in 1987. And yes, we changed our name from the Phobic Trust of New Zealand 5 years ago to Anxiety New Zealand Trust. And we've really continued to evolve ever since. We've got a lot more services. We've got a great volunteer board of trustees with excellent representation of diverse communities. So we've got some Samoan and some Chinese representation there, and some good clinical knowledge. So it makes me really happy to hear the positive feedback that we get from others about what we do.
Right.
So we work in mental health, and I think first off, it's so important that we walk that walk. That we're a supportive place to work, and that we're modelling those ways to well-being.
Right.
So kind of thing that helps encourage good work culture. I mean, I could be biased, but I think it's something that we shine at.
Oh, I'm sure you're a very objective CEO, Sarah. But Nadine, where did you come from before joining Anxiety New Zealand?
So previously I was working at Massey University in the student health clinic there, and my background is in health psychology, so particularly where physical health issues intersect with mental health.
A range of things. Another great part of our service is we offer peer support groups for people with lived experience of anxiety, and also we have another group for social anxiety, which is incredibly popular with that sort of 18 to 25-year-old age range.
Well, you've listed some very significant support there. How can people access that list specifically? Because I understand that Anxiety New Zealand has a new website now, a flash new website, and is that up and running now?
Yeah, we do. We have a new website, which is fantastic, and it is... we're really thankful to Chris Boyd at Eden Arts Club for designing the new website, and look, we couldn't have done it without him. It's also awesome because we can now upload a whole range of new content and make it really valuable for people who are visiting. We've got actually a video that we'll be launching in the next week, and that's a big thanks to Alex at AL Media. They're a real great bunch of people to work with, and basically we had an idea to produce a video, and we ran that past our team and then past the Mental Health Foundation. And then a fellow called Peter, he's a pretty neat guy. He's got lived experience of anxiety and just an amazing life. And he's come along and talked about his experiences and what it's like to live with anxiety. And it's quite inspiring to see. So we'll be launching that later this week. And if any listeners are interested, they can visit our Facebook page or go to our website.
We're talking today to the CEO of Anxiety New Zealand, Sarah Woolard, and psychologist Nadine Isler about Anxiety New Zealand specifically. But I think we need to talk some more about the prevalence of anxiety. Why are we such an anxious society, Sarah? Or Nadine, you're going to address this, are you?
Well, it's hard to tell really whether it's just that we're talking about it more and that it's more recognised, or if it's in fact on the rise. I would suggest it's probably both. From our perspective, it's fantastic that we're talking about it more and that people are accessing help and that it's becoming slowly less and less stigmatised. But at the same time, it does also seem as though more people are suffering the symptoms and than ever before. And if you look at research where people are reporting their symptoms, so in fact talking about what they're feeling rather than just saying I have anxiety or I have depression, if they're talking about how they're feeling, it does seem as though more people are actually experiencing some of the more negative side effects of anxiety and depression.
So you're saying that Kiwis are learning how to talk about their feelings?
Heaven forbid.
Terrible, isn't it?
I think there are just so many things that we could point to in modern life that are contributing to more pressure in terms of our mental health. Just the sheer pace of life these days. We've probably got more control over things in certain ways than ever before, so we're able to actually lower our immediate distress, which can mean that actually we're less good at tolerating distress when it does inevitably happen. So you might be able to control the temperature of your environment all of the time, for example, and have air conditioning in your house and in your car and so on and so forth. But there might still be things that happen to you in your everyday life that you absolutely cannot control, and then you're less equipped to deal with it. So that's one theory. And then, of course, just in terms of financial pressure, and, we've got 1 in 7 households in New Zealand living in poverty at the moment. All those sorts of things will certainly be contributing as well.
And more than 50% who are now renting in Auckland, which is an unheard of statistic, really, when you come to think that New Zealanders have owned their own homes for so many years. And it's, I think, a tradition that we own our own homes. So doesn't that require a very big adjustment? And we lose control when we're a tenant in many ways. So though, Nadine, you've said that we in certain areas we may have more control, I think we have less control if we are a renter and a tenant. We don't have control over the rent. We may not have longevity in terms of staying in that place because the landlord wants to redevelop the section and build units all over it and those sorts of things. So doesn't that lead to a greater insecurity?
Absolutely, yeah. And I should have said before, it's more perceived control. You feel as though you can do small things in your environment, but in fact we're working more hours for less pay. Right. You might be in a difficult situation where you're having to move house more often, and like you said, we're working the same sort of hours but aren't able to fund a house deposit or something like that compared to previous generations.
Well, I mean, that's the crucial thing, isn't it? We've got to have 250,000 to be able to place a deposit on a home in Auckland. And I guess that's why so many people are perhaps leaving Auckland, but then doesn't that mean that they're separating themselves from family and friends and work and their whole support structure? Sarah, do you want to make any comment here? Or are you leaving it, you'd like to leave it to Nadine?
Family and friends are incredibly important to mental well-being, and if those connections are severed, or if people are forced to move out of the communities that they're connected in, then absolutely that can have an effect on mental well-being. That's why it's so key that people, wherever they are finding ways that they are every day putting those good things into their lives which support their well-being and help build their resilience.
Right. Well, what about social media? I mean, I transferred from my old phone to a new phone just last week. and I got Vodafone to transfer all my contacts and my apps and all that sort of thing. But then I discovered that I was having difficulty accessing those apps. And that was incredibly stressful because I do Airbnb and I needed to be able to communicate with guests that were due to arrive. So, I mean, while mobiles and technology can help us, Nadine, how do you think, the new media, the new technology increases our stress?
Well, we're also accessible 24/7. That's the other problem too, and phones and social media and computers and all that sort of thing are often designed to be addictive. So when you have the little red circle popped up on your phone with a message or something that you need to attend to, you've got this immediate need to go and solve that particular problem. And then you sort of have the resulting dopamine rush in your brain that says, okay, well done, and so you do it again, and so you're a bit of a slave to your phone.
Right.
And like you say, when things don't work that well and technology isn't playing along, that can add incredible amounts of stress.
I mean, I think Kiwis are becoming slaves to their phone. I took a ferry ride down to Half Moon Bay from the city yesterday, and here's a family waiting for the ferry to go back, and they've all got their phones out. The kids have got their phones out. Mum and Dad have got their phones out. They're not communicating. And so what's the impact of that, do you think?
Well, I nothing good. I think that there's a huge breeding ground for social comparison when it comes to phones and social media as well.
What, the phones we actually have in front of us? Or
partly that, but also what you're accessing, So if you're looking at social media and you're seeing pictures of what somebody else is doing, and of course you only ever see the best stuff from other people's lives in general, and then you've got that social comparison element where you're comparing what you're doing or who you are or how you look with somebody else.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly distracted by phones or videoing something instead of really truly being there, we lose that skill.
So people are resolving conflict by texting, by emailing, rather than picking the phone up or actually going and seeing the person and saying, well, how are we going to resolve this?
It seems so. And to really understand that behaviour, we need to understand what's called a safety behaviour. And so a safety behaviour is something that you do to try and minimise your anxiety in the short term. But unfortunately, it has the long-term effect of actually increasing your anxiety. So I'll give you an example. If somebody is afraid of dogs, for example, they might avoid all dogs, never come near them, never pet them. And in the short term, that will actually make them feel better because they're avoiding that particular stressful situation. But in the long term, they never learn that the difference between a friendly and an unfriendly dog, and they don't learn that actually it probably would have been okay in most cases to go near a dog. Mm. And so it's a similar sort of thing. If you avoid the difficult conversation, if you avoid having to have that emotional connection, exactly, or the conflict, or using some assertiveness, not only do you get rewarded for that in the interim because it feels just more comfortable because you've just escaped from that altogether, you actually don't get to practice that skill.
So is this sort of a reflection of this sort of me?
Well, it's an anxiety behaviour, certainly. It's and we all tend to want to avoid things that are going to make us feel anxious. It's a natural human survival instinct that you avoid the thing that's dangerous, so to speak. And so it may be
perceived to be dangerous.
Exactly, yes, but our brains don't know the difference between
right.
our proverbial tiger chasing us through the jungle and a difficult conversation with maybe somebody in authority or someone we're wanting to break up with.
Well, is the mobile the tiger chasing us through the forest?
Well, I think the mobile might be our way of avoiding the tiger altogether, but they're not learning how to deal with it.
Right, so where's this going to take us, do you think? I mean, does it suggest that this is one of the reasons why Anxiety New Zealand is seeing greater demand to address anxiety, do you think, Sarah?
Well, look, Partly it's always a bit tough to try and clarify exactly what's driving increase in demand for our services. But we can, definitely say that, at the moment the Trust is both, we're the fence at the top of the cliff providing education and resources to help people stay well, but we're also with the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff picking up the pieces, and we daily abseil between the two, and that's in large part due to sheer demand for the services. So we're not a crisis service, but that's not to say that we're not, people that we're seeing are not going into crisis, or people calling our helpline are not in crisis. Based on that, we work a lot with a range of other health services and community mental health teams and CAT teams across all DHPs in New Zealand.
So the CAT team is the crisis team?
Yeah, CAT team is crisis team. So we have a pretty regular contact and trying to help people get services.
So how can people access your? You referred to the 24/7. It's a 24/7 helpline.
Yeah, so it's a 24/7 helpline, and they do some pretty amazing work. And we answer 95% of calls, day or night, which is incredible. It's one of the highest rates in New Zealand. Well, don't quote me, but I'd say it's the highest rate. So. We have a range of callers. For example, somebody mid-panic attack that might be pulled over on the side of the motorway or stuck on the harbour bridge. And look, it's normal to worry at times, and it's healthy to have a mechanism, anxiety, to motivate us and help keep us safe. But a bit of stress gets us out of bed, and it helps us meet our responsibilities and deadlines. And it also helps keep other people safe too. For example, we keep a close eye on a kid that's close to the edge of a swimming pool, but sometimes anxiety goes beyond that, and on the helpline, we, for example, we might speak with somebody with intrusive or distressing thoughts around getting sick, that something is contaminated, or worrying that something bad will happen. So a person might be washing their hands a lot, or cleaning, or checking the stove, or the hair straighteners are off, or the front door is locked, for example.
Right.
Yeah, so sometimes people need to have a break from those repetitive thoughts, and that's where the helpline can come in. So they may have escalating anxiety despite doing the thing that usually helps temporarily relieve that anxiety. So in that case, we'd provide some education around what intrusive thoughts are, around anxiety, normalising anxiety, and talk about when intrusive thoughts might signal needing some help. We could teach some distraction techniques and other relaxation exercises.
Well, when there's something that we're afraid of, we do tend to spend a lot of cognitive energy on it. So we worry about it, we think about it a lot. And then we might do things, our behaviour will then reflect the way that we're fearful, exactly as you say. And so we might then reach out for things like substances, for example, to numb how we're feeling about the next day or a particular situation, or to help us get through. And the other thing too is, like what I was talking about before with the safety behaviours, and escape or avoidance being two of the big ones, we might then start to do less in our lives, and so our worlds become smaller and smaller, and more and more things become anxiety inducing because we're doing them less often.
And we become isolated, so we have, we used that word connection, didn't we? We lose our connection.
Absolutely, and we know how important connection with other people is to mental health. It's a simple fact. We know it's very, very important.
So on the positive side, what are some of the things that we can do to help our anxiety, to help those fears?
Well, thankfully there is quite a range of things that we can do. So there is a positive part of the conversation too, and that's things from lifestyle changes, getting out and talking to more people, being honest about what you're experiencing, things like exercise and fresh air and food, and all those things do make a difference, because they tend to calm, from a physiological perspective, they calm the body and they help you prepare for what you're having, the challenges that you're having to deal with. And of course, potentially getting a referral from a GP or going to see somebody about what you're experiencing, to be able to talk about it and find out that it's actually, you're not alone. Right. So many people do experience anxiety and depression, and that there are things that we can do.